My 70th birthday table glowed with candlelight, laughter ringing out, bouquets of every color piled high along the long table. For a moment, it felt like I was living a rare slice of peace after years of hardship. My children and grandchildren gathered close. Their hugs, their blessings, their warm hands seemed to erase the loneliness old age so often drags along. Smiling, I laid my palm on the small wooden box in front of me, ready to reveal the special gift I'd been saving for years, the money I'd quietly put aside for my daughter as a promise for her future. But before I could finish my sentence, a sharp voice cut through the noise around me. "Your money is mine, too. Don't forget I'm part of this family." I looked up. My son-in-law David wasn't smiling. He sat at the head of the table, back straight, eyes dark and rigid. The room went silent. Even the clinking of silverware stopped, as if the air itself had fallen into a deep hole. Blood rushed to my face. My grandchildren stared wide-eyed at each other. My daughter's cheeks burned red as she tightened her grip on her wine glass, trying to hide her shame. No one laughed anymore. David's words echoed in my head like a blade splitting the heart of the party, shattering the warmth. I opened my mouth, but my throat locked. In that moment, I no longer felt like the guest of honor at my own birthday. I felt like an old woman being judged in public by her own family. The party air froze. I searched David's eyes for a hint of a joke, a softening smile, any sign that what he'd said had been a slip, but there was none. He sat there, face like ice, eyes daring me. "I have the right. You must accept it." My daughter Sarah forced a weak smile, lowering her voice. "David, it's Mom's birthday. Don't talk like that." But her feeble protest only made him harder. He slammed his glass down. The sharp crack made a few of the children jump, whispering behind me. "I'm telling the truth." "Don't tell me you've forgotten that family means sharing. Your mother's money is ultimately ours." Under the table, my hands trembled. I wanted to shout, to smash the heavy air hanging over us, but Sarah's eyes held me back. She wasn't looking at me. She stared down at the table, as though afraid of something even larger. That look clenched my heart. Relatives started whispering. A few tried to change the subject, asking the kids questions, but no one could dispel the dark cloud spreading over the room. The laughter, the toasts all gone, leaving only the pounding of my heart in my chest. In that moment, I understood. David's words weren't an outburst. They were a declaration. And worse, they were probably only the beginning of something much darker. I drew a long, shaky breath and forced myself to stand. My heart pounded so hard I could hear each beat inside my chest. In 70 years, I never imagined the day my own son-in-law would treat me like a walking wallet and humiliate me in front of my daughter and grandchildren. "David." I tried to keep my voice even, but it shook, hoarse at the edges. "My money is the work of a lifetime. It's not something you just take." He didn't lower his head or apologize. Instead, a smirk tugged at his mouth, his eyes glittering with ridicule. "My mother-in-law's life's work is still for this family. Sarah and I are family. Or do you think we're just here freeloading?" The words landed like a slap across my face. Sarah flinched. Her eyes shimmered as if she might cry, but she kept silent. Her silence hurt more than anything he'd said. I looked around the table, embarrassed faces, eyes sliding away from mine. One of the grandkids whispered, "Why is Uncle David mad at Grandma?" Shame rose hot in my throat. My nails dug into the wood edge of the table. A bitter truth flashed through me. If I stayed quiet tonight, if I swallowed this, I'd lose whatever standing I had left in my own family. I wanted to run, to burst into tears, but a strange, hard anger lifted my spine. I looked David in the eye and knew tonight was the start of a storm, one that could sweep this family away. The room seemed to thicken until every breath felt heavy. Memories flickered past rainy mornings, walking Sarah to school in split-soled shoes, sleepless nights taking extra shifts, dinners where I pretended I wasn't hungry so she could eat. And now, that sacrifice claimed by a man who dared call it his. I rapped my hand on the table. The crack made the room jump. "David," I said, each word set like a stone. "You can look down on me if you want, but don't ever think money buys you a place in this family. I have never and will never hand my life's work to someone outside my blood." A rustle of whispers circled the table. Some people exhaled. Others glanced at Sarah. Her face had gone pale. Her eyes brimmed. David snorted, folded his arms, and leaned back, all challenge. "Then we'll see how long you can keep it, won't we?" It sounded like a declaration of war. Ice slid down my spine, but a fierce resolve burned hotter under it. I would not let him take what I had bled to save. That night, after the heavy, ruined party, I sat alone in the quiet living room. The congratulatory flowers still smelled sharp and raw. Chairs hadn't been straightened. But in my head, David's words replayed, a blade that kept reopening the wound. I closed my eyes, and the past pulled me under, back to a time when I still believed family love could shelter me from every storm. Back then, I was just past 30, a widow with a little girl. My husband, the man I'd loved since I was young, died suddenly after a brutal illness. I still remember his last night, his cold hand in mine, the sorry in his eyes as he left me and Sarah alone in a dangerous world. The small house turned cavernous and cold. I became both father and mother. The years that followed were bone-tired but stubborn. I took whatever work there was, cleaning, selling, sewing through the night to hit the factory's deadline. One winter, snow piled in drifts, Sarah shivered in a thin coat while I carried her on my back and dragged a crate of vegetables to sell at the market. Every dollar I scraped together, I saved for her. I told myself if my daughter could grow up happy, every sacrifice was worth it. I didn't think about old age or loneliness, only about giving Sarah a better future. I believed a mother's love was the strongest rope on earth, a line no one could cut. I never imagined that years later that rope would fray because of a stranger named David. Sarah grew up under my wing, but her childhood wasn't easy. She was a quiet child, eyes always far away. At night, under the weak yellow light, I'd sew and hum while she studied. Once she looked up and asked, "Mom, why don't we have a dad like other kids?" The question pierced me. I smiled, smoothed her hair. "You have me, and that's enough. Your father is watching over us from the sky." She nodded, but the sadness stayed in her eyes. No matter how hard I tried, the absence of a father left a hollow nothing could fill. Maybe that emptiness sowed the distance that came later. When she hit her teens, I worked even more to pay for school. Family dinners grew rare, replaced by lunchboxes in the fridge and hurried notes. I thought she understood that it was all for her, but she began to close off, slipping into her room with a thin smile. Sometimes I'd find her sitting in the dark, clutching a notebook, her small shoulders shaking. I wanted to hold her, but I stepped back, afraid I'd only add weight to her burden. The crack widened, quiet but real, like a wall starting to split. I kept believing it would heal once she grew up, that she'd understand the silent sacrifices. I didn't know that while I was building a sturdy roof, another door was opening a door to a new world with a man named David. I still remember the first afternoon David walked into my home. Sarah had just finished college, her face brighter than I'd ever seen as she said, "Mom, this is David. He's special to me." He was tall, neatly dressed, with bright eyes and a polite smile. He reached for my hand, voice warm. "It's an honor to meet you. Sarah's told me so much. I admire your sacrifice." His words softened me. For the first time in years, Sarah looked truly happy. My heart unclenched. Maybe, I thought, this was fate finally being kind. He kept coming by fixing this, carrying that, bringing me small bouquets or Sarah's favorite food. I saw the care and relaxed. I even joked, maybe I won't have to worry about Sarah being lonely anymore. But beneath the sweetness, something felt a touch. Too interested. He'd ask harmless questions that pricked at me. Do you have much in savings? Is it hard living alone? Is the house fully in your name? He asked lightly, like concern, but a chill flickered in me. I brushed it off. I didn't want to doubt the man my daughter loved. After all those hard years, seeing Sarah find support felt like all I could wish for. Still, deep down, a thin voice whispered, "Don't hand over your trust so easily, Evelyn. Money and love rarely share a calm road." They married on a soft autumn afternoon, gold leaves underfoot, a violin singing, my daughter's smile so radiant, it drowned every old sorrow. Sarah, all in white, walked into the chapel on David's arm, eyes lit with joy. I sat in the front row, tearful and thankful. She'd found her harbor. After the wedding, she moved into a new apartment with him. I visited often with food and small gifts. David greeted me warmly, called me Mom, pulled out chairs, poured tea. But as months passed, I noticed changes. Sarah seemed less free. When I called, David often answered first. If I asked to take her shopping or for a walk, she'd glance at him as if waiting for permission. I pretended not to see, but unease stirred. Once, while we were in the kitchen, David came in, a quick frost in his eyes before a thin smile. "Don't discuss our finances with your mom," he told Sarah. "Keep family matters in the family, okay?" He spoke to her, but the words were aimed at me. I felt the sting. Sarah nodded, a paper-thin smile. I kept quiet, my heart pinched tight. Now and then, he'd float questions that sounded casual. "Have you thought of selling your old place? Living alone must be inconvenient." Or, "Have you considered a will? Better to be prepared." His tone was warm, his eyes calculated. I smiled it off, but the stone inside me grew heavier. Sarah shared less and less. She moved in his orbit, dodging my questions about their marriage. I told myself, every marriage has bumps. It'll be fine. But in my bones I knew, these weren't bumps. This was control, and it was growing, a dark shadow spreading over Sarah and me. Time passed. I tried to ignore the unease clawing at me, telling myself maybe I was too sensitive, maybe old age made me worry too much. But David's behavior grew sharper, impossible to deny. One day, I found the cabinet door in my living room slightly ajar. Inside was the small wooden box where I kept my most important documents: savings passbooks, insurance contracts, the deed to my house. I was certain I had locked it. That day, the lock sat twisted, the lid loose. My heart thudded. When I asked Sarah, she brushed it off. "Maybe you forgot, Mom." But her eyes slid away, and I knew she was hiding something. David began showing up at my house even without Sarah. "Need me to fix that light bulb?" "Want me to tidy up for you?" he'd ask, all politeness. I couldn't refuse, but each time I caught his eyes roaming the rooms like a surveyor, measuring, calculating. One evening, while I brewed tea, David sat across from me, voice calm but unyielding. "Mom, you should think ahead. Older folks need security. If you sign this house over to Sarah and me, you'll rest easier. We'll take care of you. You won't have to worry about a thing." The words froze me. It was no suggestion, it was a claim. I met his gaze and forced a steady tone. "Thank you, but I have no such plan. Everything will be handled in my time." He smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. He nodded as if backing off, but I knew it was only temporary. After he left, I sat collapsed in my chair, my hands trembling around a cup gone cold. A creeping fear wrapped around me. David didn't only want to control Sarah. He was setting his sights on me, and just as my gut warned me, my 70th birthday proved it. His blunt words at that party weren't spontaneous. They were the result of a plan cultivated, deliberate. The morning after, my house felt hungover. Ribbons dangled limp, balloons shriveled into corners, the sweet sour smell of cake and wine clung in the air. I carried a trash bag, picking up paper plates and forks, as if sweeping my dignity off the floor. Each clatter rang like an echo of David's voice, sharp, cutting, unforgettable. The doorbell rang. I startled. For a moment I prayed it was the mailman or a neighbor borrowing sugar. But no. David stood there, shirt crisp, tie loose, every inch the man who knew he looked good in any situation. He smiled thin, like a victor returning to inspect the battlefield. "May I come in, Mom?" he asked, stressing the word Mom as if it were his right. I stepped aside. Not because I feared him, because I didn't want a scene in front of neighbors. He strode in, glancing at the sagging balloons, lips curling. "Quite a party," he muttered. I set the trash bag down, wiped my hands on my apron. "If you came to apologize, I'll make tea." He laughed, open in his mockery. "I came to talk business. Realistically, Mom, the housing market's good right now. Sell this place, you'd have plenty to live on. Sarah and our burden would ease." "I don't feel burdened," I said flatly. "What's mine is already planned." He stepped closer, his stance like a lecturer. "You're mistaken. We're family. Roof repairs, medical bills, the kids' future private schools cost money." Sarah's stretched thin. "You can't keep clinging to everything." I held out my hands, palms rough from years of labor. "These hands raised my daughter. I don't owe anyone. And you'd do well to remember, you came after." A shadow crossed his face. He leaned on the counter, chest rising in small, controlled breaths like a wolf chained. "Last night, Sarah cried herself to sleep. She was ashamed of you, ashamed of how you embarrassed her in front of everyone. If you love her, you won't make it harder." The words struck my softest place. My voice cracked. "Where is Sarah?" "At home. She needs rest." He lifted his chin. "Sign temporary power of attorney. Just a formality. No one's forcing you out. You'll still live here, but legally, we'll manage the property." I understood. Manage meant control. I opened a drawer, pulled out a brown envelope. His eyes narrowed with triumph. But when I placed it on the table, his face faltered. Inside wasn't a power of attorney. It was my old will, ink faded, but words clear. My assets are mine to decide. "You want legal talk?" I said, eyes locked on his. "Fine, I can talk in paperwork too." His mouth twitched. He closed his eyes a beat, then softened his voice, honeyed. "Mom, we can do this peacefully. Don't turn it into a war." I tapped the envelope on the table 3 times, like a gavel. "This war wasn't mine, David. You declared it first." Sunlight spilled through the window, dust swirling like tiny storms. Inside me, a vow hardened. No one, family or not, would ever lay hands on my life's work. And I knew this was only the first blow. Behind it would come larger demands, sharper traps, and secrets I hadn't yet dared to name. That afternoon, while I was still simmering from our morning clash, Sarah appeared at my door. She knocked softly. Her face was pale, dark circles under her eyes. Relief hit me. At least she'd come. But sorrow too, heavy as stone in my chest. "Mom, can we talk?" Her voice rasped, timid, almost pleading. I brewed tea, set a cup in front of her, waiting. She twisted her fingers together, tapping nervously at the rim. "David only wants what's best for you. He's a little blunt, but you know he means well, right? We just want you safe." I looked at her, my little girl, once small enough to carry on my back, now repeating her husband's words like a shadow. I wanted to shake her, to shout her awake. Instead, I whispered, "Safe for me or safe for him? Can you tell me the truth?" Her lips trembled, eyes shimmering. But before she could answer, the door burst open. David walked in, holding a stack of papers. Well, what luck. A mother-daughter chat. Perfect timing. Let's just sign and get this done. The air thickened. Sarah shrank, like a child caught doing wrong. David laid the stack on the table power of attorney documents. His voice stayed even, polite but unyielding. Mom, you only need to sign here. The assets remain yours. We'll just have authority to manage when necessary. Nothing dramatic. I stared at him. I said no. Sarah's hands shook as she touched the papers, whispering, Mom, it's just paperwork. It'll put me and David at ease. I froze. Since when had my daughter, the girl who once trembled at the absence of a father, now trembled to protect a man, even against me? As the silence stretched, my eyes drifted across the pile. A page stuck out from the bottom, not a power of attorney, but a bank statement. My name glared from the top, yet below were transfers I didn't recognize. My heart stopped. This. My voice caught. Why are there transactions from my account? I never... David snatched for the paper, smile stiffening. Sarah ducked her head, lips pressed tight, her hand squeezing the teacup until a faint crack sounded. In that instant, I knew something had slipped far beyond my control. My words tore out, each one jagged. Who took my account information? Sarah, was it you? Sarah shot up, chair scraping loud against the floor. Mom, please, don't make this worse. We only... David's hand pressed on her shoulder, forcing her down. His tone was low, sharp as a blade. You're exhausted. Don't torment yourself over some papers. My hands trembled, not with fear, but rage, fused with betrayal. And beneath it, I felt another shadow moving, a secret Sarah knew, one she still refused to speak. I pushed David's hand away and gripped Sarah's shoulders, forcing her to lift her face. Her eyes brimmed, tears poised to spill. Sarah, I demanded, voice shaking but fierce. Tell me, did you give him my account details? Did you agree to this? Her head shook violently, tears streaming. Mom, I didn't want this. But David said, if we didn't, we couldn't cover the kids' needs, couldn't pay off the debt. I thought it was only temporary. A crack split inside me. Every sacrifice, every drop of sweat I had poured into her life now turned into the excuse to hand it all to another man. David cut in, voice cold. Stop making her feel guilty. You should understand at your age, you can't manage everything. We're not stealing. We're relieving your burden. I snapped toward him, my eyes burning. Relieving my burden. Since when did my freedom become a burden? Since when did my daughter have to sell out her mother's trust for some illusion of safety? Sarah broke down, sobbing into her hands. Mom, don't say that. I just didn't want to lose him. I can't bear my family falling apart. Her words struck me numb. Falling apart? So in her heart, I wasn't the anchor anymore. The one she feared losing wasn't her mother. It was her husband. The room pressed in. I stumbled back, gripping a chair to steady myself. Choose, Sarah. My voice was raw, heavy as stone. Your mother's trust or his control. David let out a laugh, dry and hollow, echoing like a hammer. You're forcing her to choose between her husband and her mother? Who's really tearing this family apart? You, Evelyn. It's you. His words stabbed straight through me. Sarah wept harder, but her voice was lost in the hollow roar inside my head. For a moment I wanted to run, to vanish. But then an image rose, the memory of carrying Sarah on my back through blizzards, vowing I'd protect her no matter the cost. And I knew the cost now might be the last piece of peace I had left. That night the house was deathly silent. Sarah had left with David after our fight, leaving only her muffled sobs still clinging to the walls. I couldn't sleep. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's tear-streaked face, tangled with David's cold smile. The sting of my daughter's betrayal cut deep, but sharper still was the need to know the truth. I pulled open the drawer, reached for the wooden box where I kept my papers. Everything seemed in place, yet something was wrong. Flipping through, my stomach dropped. One of my old savings passbooks was missing, the one I'd always intended to keep for Sarah in case she needed it. Gone, and some property deeds had been disturbed. My chest tightened. Only Sarah or David could know this hiding spot. I forced my panic down, sat at the table, and began writing down every document I still had. If they'd touched my money, I had to be certain. The next morning I went to the bank. The branch manager, an old acquaintance, frowned as he looked over my account. "Mrs. Evelyn, there have been several large transfers lately. Are you sure you didn't authorize them?" My throat went dry. Transfers? To where? He handed me the printout. The numbers screamed off the page, large sums withdrawn regularly, funneled into an account under the name David Miller, all sound drained from the world. Under each transaction was a messy signature, clumsy forgeries of my name. I felt as if I'd stepped off a cliff, no longer suspicion-proof. David hadn't just been circling. He had already begun stealing. And the cruelest cut, he couldn't have done it without Sarah's silence or worse, her consent. I folded the papers tight, thanked the manager, and stumbled out. My feet dragged along the sidewalk, the autumn wind whipping my face. But nothing colder than this truth. The family I built with blood and sweat was now devouring me from the inside. That evening, Sarah came alone. She knocked gently, as if afraid to provoke me further. I opened the door without a word and laid the bank statement on the table. Her eyes scanned the page, her face drained of color, lips trembling soundlessly. Arms crossed, my voice rasped. "Explain this to me. Why is my money flowing into David's account? Why is my signature here?" She staggered back, cornered like a trapped animal. "Mom, I don't know. David said it was just a loan, that he'd pay it back. I didn't think he—" "Didn't think?" My voice cracked, almost a shout. "You let him forge my name, take my life's work, and you call that not thinking?" Tears spilled, blotting the paper with blurred numbers. "Mom, don't look at me like that. I never wanted to betray you. I was afraid. I was afraid of losing David. He promised if I obeyed he would change. I believed him." "Believed?" I laughed, hollow and bitter. "My daughter, you trust a man who steals from your own mother more than you trust me, the one who raised you through hunger?" Sarah collapsed into a chair, hands covering her face, sobs racking her body. I watched her shaking shoulders, my heart splitting in two. I wanted to hold her, but my arms hung useless because what comfort could be real when trust was already broken? "Sarah." My voice dropped, ragged but soft. "You could lose a husband and someday find another. But if you lose your mother, you'll never have another." She lifted her head, eyes swollen, lips trembling. "You don't understand, Mom. I owe David. He knows things if they come out. This family will be destroyed." The blood drained from me. "What things? What secret is he holding over you that makes you accept this?" Her teeth dug into her lip. She shook her head violently, panic in her eyes. She wouldn't say. She only cried harder. And in that moment I realized it wasn't just money. Something deeper, darker was chaining her. And if I wanted to save my daughter, I'd have to drag that secret into the light, no matter how cruel it was. The next day I went to Sarah and David's apartment under the excuse of visiting the kids. They rushed to me, their laughter like a brief balm. But when Sarah saw me at the door, her face flickered with fear like I was an intruder. While she busied herself in the kitchen, I let my eyes wander. On David's desk lay a half-open briefcase, papers, spilled bills, contracts, and a sealed envelope with a bank logo. I slid it out. My breath caught when I read the bold print. Miller Trust Fund. Beneficiary, Sarah Miller. A trust fund, Sarah listed as the beneficiary, and under contributor David Miller, Huge deposits had been made in his hand. Why? Was it security for Sarah? Or another chain money she couldn't reject, tying her tighter to him? Just then, Sarah returned with a tray. When she saw the envelope in my hand, her face went white. The tray clattered, porcelain shattering across the floor. She lunged forward, snatching the envelope, stammering, "Mom, this isn't what you think." I seized her wrist, locked eyes with her. "Then tell me, what exactly is it?" She sobbed, shaking her head. "Please, don't make me. If you know, everything will collapse." Her answer chilled me. Far from reassuring, it proved David had built a cage of lies, and Sarah was trapped inside. That evening, I pretended I'd forgotten my scarf and returned. David had taken the kids out, and Sarah hesitated, but let me in. The apartment was dim, golden lamplight pooling across the table. David's leather briefcase sat waiting. My pulse hammered. I opened it. Inside was a thick stack of papers. My hands shook as I flipped through, and my stomach lurched. Photocopies of my bank contracts, insurance papers, even the deed to my house. On the cover, scrawled in red ink, "Transfer pending signature." A sound behind me. I spun. Sarah stood in the doorway, eyes wide with horror. She darted forward, trying to rip the file away. "You can't look at that!" I clung to it, demanding, "Why does David have every one of my documents? Did you give them to him, Sarah?" She collapsed, sobbing on the floor. "I had no choice. If I refused, he would expose everything." My blood froze. "Expose what?" She shook her head violently, burying her face. "Don't ask me. I can't tell you." I sank to my knees, the stack of papers in my grip. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was proof. David was preparing to seize everything I owned, disguising theft as legal transfer. And my daughter, my own blood, was complicit, chained by some awful secret. The room spun. My breath came ragged. But one thought pierced through the fog. If David thought I'd bow to him, he was wrong. I would drag him into the light, no matter the cost. I clutched the papers tight, as if they were the scales of justice themselves, and I knew the real battle had only just begun. The next day, I summoned them both to my house. No more whispers, no more polite games. The birthday party had been turned into a battleground. Now my living room would become the courtroom. David arrived first, face calm, dressed in a suit like he was heading to a business deal. Sarah trailed behind him, eyes red, hands clenched as if to keep from shaking. I pointed to the wooden table in the center of the room. On it lay the stack of papers I'd taken from his briefcase and the bank statements showing the forged transactions. "Sit," I said, my voice colder than ice. "We'll speak plainly today." David's eyes flicked across the documents. The corner of his mouth curled. "Well, you found them. Saves me the trouble of bringing them myself." Sarah whimpered, trying to hush him, but he pulled out a chair, laced his fingers together, and looked at me like a lawyer confident of victory. "So, what now? Accuse me of theft? Make Sarah feel guilty? Neither will change the fact that you're old and your assets need someone capable to manage them." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Manage? Call it what it is, David. Stealing." The word cracked the air. Sarah collapsed into a chair, covering her face, tears streaming. David glanced at her, sighed theatrically. "Stop crying, Sarah. Everything we're doing is for the future." I slammed my palm on the table. Future. A future where my daughter stays silent while her husband forges her mother's name. A future where I die humiliated, watching my life's work fall into a stranger's hands. David arched a brow, smirking. "Stranger? I'm Sarah's husband. I'm father to your grandchildren. I'm not a stranger. I am family." "No." My voice shook but rang out. "Family doesn't build castles out of their mother-in-law's blood and tears. Family doesn't shackle a wife with secrets. Family doesn't betray trust." Sarah sobbed harder, turning to her husband. "David, stop. I can't take this anymore. I can't watch Mom suffer like this." He gripped her hand tightly, forcing her down. Quiet. You don't understand. This is the only way. Watching that broke me. My daughter, my Sarah, reduced to a shadow under his hand. My chest burned, but I pulled the evidence toward me, flipping page after page, my voice cutting sharp. Here. Transfers from my account to David Miller. Forged signatures. And here photocopies of my house deed, ready to transfer without my consent. Proof, David. Hard proof. He leaned back, smug. And who will believe you? I'm family. I had access. And as for signatures who can really prove they're fake? I nearly screamed. You think I don't know my own signature? You think truth can be buried forever? Sarah sobbed into her hands, shaking. David, please, stop this. I can't bear it. He shoved her hand aside. This is for you, for the kids. Without me, do you think your mother would ever leave you anything? Do you want your children growing up with nothing? I slammed the stack down so hard dust jumped from the table. No, David, this isn't for Sarah. This isn't for the children. This is for your greed. Look at her, she's nothing but your shadow now. And you dare call that love? Sarah crumpled, shoulders shaking violently. I reached for her, but she recoiled, whispering, Mom, I'm sorry. I knew all along. I knew, but I was too afraid to fight him. I froze. My daughter hadn't just been silent, she had known, and chosen to let me be deceived. David leaned forward, eyes glinting, voice like a knife. There, you heard it. She knew. She chose silence, because she knows I hold everything. So instead of fighting, why not sign? Let's keep this civilized. I looked at them, one ruthless, one broken, and my heart shattered. All my years of sacrifice, and this was what remained. Betrayal at my own table, but I forced myself to stand. The chair clattered to the floor behind me. My chest hammered, but my voice rang clear. No, I will not sign. I will not let my life's work be stolen. If this has to go to court, then court it is. If I must face the shame of my family, so be it. But I will not let a thief become master of my home. David's face darkened, fury flashing in his eyes. He rose, stepping toward me, breath hot with threat. You'd better be careful. Alone, how long do you think you can stand against me and against the truth Sarah is hiding? I didn't back down. I thrust the bank statement into his face, each word sharp as glass. You can threaten me all you want, but you forget I have nothing left to fear. The only thing I'll take to my grave is my honor, and I'll keep it even if it costs me everything. Sarah trembled, caught between us, her sobs the only sound in the suffocating room. I turned to Sarah, tears blurring my eyes, but my voice steady. Sarah, you need to see. This isn't about money anymore. This is about letting your husband turn me into prey. Do you want your children to grow up remembering their grandmother as someone robbed by their own parents? Do you want them to learn betrayal instead of love? She sobbed into her palms, shaking her head. Mom, I don't know what to do. I'm terrified. If I resist, he'll leave me. I'll lose everything. I'm not strong enough. I knelt before her, gripping her icy hands. You don't need to be strong. You just need to be honest. Speak the truth you're hiding. I'll carry the rest. David's face darkened, his voice slicing through the room. She won't say a word. She knows that if the truth comes out, it won't just be me, it'll destroy this family completely. The air froze. I tightened my hold on Sarah, forcing her to meet my gaze. Sarah, you must choose. Choose me, or the darkness he's dragging you into. The room filled with her muffled sobs. David leaned back, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at his lips, waiting. I too waited, my chest aching, my tears falling, but my voice rang like a vow. I would rather lose everything than lose my soul, and I will not let you, my daughter, lose yours to fear. Sarah shook violently, her hands cold in mine. Her eyes darted between me and David, like a bird trapped between cage and sky. Finally, through trembling lips, she whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry. I can't fight him. I need this marriage. I need my children to have a father." The words slammed into me like a hammer. My hand slipped from hers. My sacrifices, everything dropped to the floor with them. Before me sat not the little girl I once carried through snow, but a woman choosing silence, choosing her husband against me. David slid an arm around her shoulder, triumphant. "See? She knows where her future is. That's the right choice." I stared at that hand on her shoulder as though it pressed down on my chest. Pain burned my throat, but a spark flared beneath it. Sarah didn't want to stay silent. She couldn't speak. Something deeper held her tongue. I wiped my tears, stood tall, voice hoarse but unbroken. "Then I'll speak. I'll take these papers to a lawyer. I don't care about scandal. I don't care about gossip. If this family must crumble for the truth to come out, then let it crumble." Sarah gasped, clutching my arm. "Mom, please, no. If you do that, everything will come out. There will be nothing left to save." I seized her shoulders, eyes boring into hers. "What is it you're hiding from me? Tell me, so I know what I'm fighting." She broke down, sobbing in my arms, but said nothing. David folded his arms, his smirk sharpening. "The more you dig, the more it hurts, Evelyn. You haven't even seen the worst yet. Believe me, what's underneath will cut deeper than money ever could." The room was suffocating Sarah's cries, David's cold laughter, and my heart pounding like a war drum. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about theft. There was a secret buried here, one so dark my daughter would betray her own mother to keep it hidden, and I swore I would uncover it, no matter the cost. A late afternoon, an envelope arrived with no name. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs. The first one froze my blood. David, hand in hand with a young woman, walking out of a hotel. Others showed them together in cafes, their bodies leaning too close, their smiles too intimate. And the last, David cradling a little boy, about 3 years old, the child's face unmistakably his. I collapsed into a chair, cold sweat soaking my skin. Every picture was a slap across the face, not just against David, but against the fragile faith I still had in this family. I called Sarah in a panic. When she arrived, I flung the photos onto the table. "Look at this. This is your husband. This is the man you chose to defend instead of me. Will you still protect him now?" She picked them up with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. I waited for the scream, for the collapse, but instead, there was no shock in her eyes, only a weary heaviness, as if the weight had been pressing down for far too long. "Sarah," I whispered, my chest tightening. You already knew?" She sank to the floor, sobbing. "Yes, Mom. I've known for over a year. I knew about the other woman. I knew about the child, but I didn't dare speak. I was terrified. If the truth came out, this family would shatter." I stood there, shaking like a tree struck by lightning. It wasn't just David who betrayed us. It was my own daughter, complicit in silence. She had chosen to let me live blind, to let him strip away our dignity piece by piece. I grabbed the photos and slammed them back onto the table. My voice cracked into a scream. "All this time, you knew. You let me suffer his insults, his thefts, while you pretended to know nothing? Do you even see me as your mother anymore?" Sarah collapsed, clutching her dress in both fists, crying hysterically. "Mom, don't say that. I didn't stay silent because I don't love you. I stayed silent because I was scared. I was scared of losing everything. I was scared my children would grow up without a father. And I was scared people would see them as bastards. I was scared of being abandoned like you once were." Her words pierced me. In an instant, I saw the little girl she once was, the one who asked me with tearful eyes, "Mom, why don't I have a dad like the others?" I thought I had healed that wound, but it had never closed, and David had seized it to chain her. "Sarah," I whispered, tears spilling, "you've chosen to live in lies out of fear of losing your husband. But don't you see? You've already lost more than that. You've lost me. You've lost yourself. And now, you've lost this family." She lifted her tear-streaked face, trembling. "Mom, you don't understand. I thought if I stayed quiet, things would stay peaceful, that he would change, that he would come back to me and the kids. But the deeper he sank, the less way out I had." I fell to my knees beside her, wrapping my arms around her shaking shoulders. But instead of comfort, I felt the void between us, a void carved by years of silence, fear, and lies. In that moment, a bitter truth consumed me. I had spent my life fighting so Sarah wouldn't go without food or warmth, but I had not seen the emptiness inside her heart. And now, David had taken that emptiness and used it to rule not just her, but me. The door clicked open. David walked in, his tie loose, his shirt wrinkled, yet his eyes as sharp and cold as ever. He froze at the sight of the photos strewn across the floor. Then quickly, his face hardened into a mask. I sprang up, shoving the pictures into his chest. "Here, can you deny this? You betrayed my daughter, you betrayed this family, and you still had the audacity to rob me." Sarah sobbed on the floor. "David, please. Mom knows everything now." David glanced at the photos, then suddenly laughed. A dry, chilling laugh. He tossed one back onto the table. "So what? Men make mistakes." "I have another child, what's so shocking? Sarah still has a husband, the kids still have a father. This family is intact as long as we all keep quiet. That's all that matters." I trembled with fury, my voice shaking as I shouted, "Keep quiet. You want us to bury your filth so you can keep living comfortably? Don't you feel shame?" David stepped closer, his voice like ice. "Shame doesn't pay tuition. Shame doesn't pay debts. I provide for Sarah and the kids. That gives me the right to have more than one family." Sarah cried out, clutching her head. "David, stop! Mom, don't listen!" But I heard nothing except the pounding of my own heart. He had admitted it not just without regret, but with pride, as though we were pawns in his game. I pointed at him, my voice breaking through tears. "You are not family. You are the one who destroyed my family." David only smirked, arms crossed. "Call it what you want, but Sarah won't leave me. She knows if I walk away, I'll take the secrets with me. And when that happens, this family will truly be ruined." The room plunged into silence. Sarah's sobs filled the air while I stood there, hollowed and burning. I realized then, this fight was no longer about money. It was about saving my daughter's soul from a man who had poisoned it with fear, and I swore I would not stop until he was exposed. 1 week later, our family gathered for the usual Sunday dinner. Relatives, old friends, even the older grandchildren were there. The air buzzed with laughter and chatter, but inside me, everything was heavy, like a stone lodged in my chest. I had made my decision. Tonight, I would speak, even if it shattered us. I set down my fork and knife, stood slowly. All eyes turned toward me. Sarah kept her head down. David sat with arms crossed, his face calm, but in his eyes flickered a sharp alertness. "I have something to say," I began, my voice rough but steady. "This is not a toast. This is not a blessing, but it is the truth, and it is time it comes out." A hush swept through the table. I pulled out the photographs I had held onto for days. The sound of paper hitting the table sliced through the silence. "These," I said, holding them high, "are pictures of my son-in-law David walking hand in hand with another woman. These show him holding a child, his child. And my daughter, Sarah, knew all along, but chose silence." The room erupted. Gasps, shocked whispers, hands flying to mouths. The grandchildren stared wide-eyed, the youngest ones asking in confusion, "Why is Grandma crying? Why is everyone angry at Dad?" Sarah crumpled over her plate, sobbing. David shot to his feet, his voice a growl. "You had no right to drag this out in front of everyone. This is private." I turned slowly, sweeping my gaze across the room, tears spilling down my face. "No, this is not private anymore. This is betrayal. This is deceit that has eaten away at our family every single day. I would rather everyone know the truth than for us to keep pretending." A cousin spoke up, voice trembling. "David, is this true?" David opened his mouth, but Sarah's scream broke through first. "Yes, it's true. All of it. He has another child. And I knew." I stayed silent because I was terrified of losing him, terrified my children would grow up fatherless like I did. I thought silence would protect us, but the price of that silence was losing my mother. Her cry ripped through the house. David staggered back, his face dark, the mask slipping. I stood tall, my hands shaking but firm. Tears streamed down, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. The truth was out. No more pretense, no more silence. The house shuddered under the weight of it, and in that moment, I knew our family would never be the same again. But at least for once, the truth had returned to where it belonged. After that Sunday dinner, my house had never been so silent. No one called with blessings anymore. No one came by just to visit. Sarah vanished for days, no messages, no calls. David disappeared entirely. Only I remained, within these old walls, wrapped in a silence so thick it felt like a sentence. I wandered from room to room, each corner echoing with memories. Here in the kitchen, I once sewed under a dim lamp while Sarah did her homework. There, in the armchair, I used to cradle my grandchildren as they drifted to sleep. Now emptiness. No laughter, no footsteps. Only the steady tick of the clock, like a hammer against my aching heart. Sometimes I asked myself, had I been wrong? Should I have kept quiet like Sarah? If I swallowed my tears, at least the family dinners would still be intact, the laughter still ringing through these walls. But then I remembered David's smirk, his cold eyes, the way he treated us like pawns in his game. And I knew silence would have cost me more than dignity. It would have cost me my soul. Still, knowing I was right did not free me from the crushing weight of loneliness. At night I lay in bed, staring into the dark. I reached out my hand, searching for another hand, a shoulder to lean on. But there was nothing, only the cold expanse of the mattress. And in that darkness, I finally understood. Loneliness is not simply having no one beside you. It is when the ones you love most choose to turn their backs. A few weeks later, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She was thinner, her face gaunt, dark circles under her eyes. She pushed a cart with only instant noodles and a few cartons of milk for the children. When she saw me, she froze. Then she turned sharply down another aisle, as if trying to escape. I hurried after her and caught her hand. "Sarah, are you all right?" She jerked her hand back, eyes glassy with panic and tears. "Mom, please, don't." I can't talk about it. My chest tightened. I wanted to pull her into my arms, to tell her she wasn't alone, that I was still here, still her safe place. But my lips stayed dry and sealed. I was afraid that even the gentlest word might push her further away. An employee passed by, glancing at us. Sarah turned away quickly, muttering, "I can't stand those looks of pity anymore. I don't want anyone to know. I don't want the kids to know." And then she left, pushing the cart, leaving me standing in the cold aisle, my hand still outstretched into emptiness. That night, I sat by the window, staring out at the street. Headlights swept past. Families strolled together on the sidewalks. And me, I had only silence. I realized then, the greatest loss wasn't money, wasn't even dignity. It was the distance between me and Sarah, a wall built from fear, lies, and silence. I whispered into the night, like a frail prayer, "My daughter, if you come back, I will still open my arms." But when will you come back to me? One afternoon, while I was watering the chrysanthemums on the porch, David appeared without warning. He no longer looked polished. His tie hung loose. His shirt was wrinkled, but his eyes still held that same cold sharpness, as if the whole world lay within his grasp. "May I come in, Mother?" he asked, dragging out the word with his usual tone of entitlement. I set down the watering can, wiped my hands on my apron. "What more do you want from me, David? Haven't you already taken everything?" He smirked, stepped inside without waiting for permission. His long strides carried him through the living room as if he owned it. He glanced at the deflated balloons still clinging to corners, at the faded ribbons, and curled his lip. "Quite a party you had." I tightened my jaw. "If you came here to apologize, I could make us some tea." He laughed dry, mocking. "No, I came to talk reality. If you keep fighting me, it won't be you who suffers, it'll be Sarah. She's too weak to take any more pressure. And the kids, too. Do you really want to watch your daughter collapse completely?" I felt my body tremble, but I forced my voice to stay calm. "You're the one driving her to the edge. You betrayed her, you betrayed this family, and now you dare to blame me?" David shrugged, eyes glinting cold. "Truth doesn't matter as much as how people see it. I know how to keep things looking perfect. You've already ruined the illusion. Don't be surprised if Sarah never forgives you for that." A stabbing pain flared in my chest. His words weren't just a threat, they were a sentence. One meant to condemn me to a lonely old age, misunderstood and cut off from my own child. I sank into a chair, my hands gripping the wooden arms until they shook. "You think you've won, don't you? But you forget, betrayal never really wins. You're building castles on sand. One day the tide will come and wash it all away." David paused, studied me, then gave a thin smile. "Maybe. But when that day comes, I'll still be standing. Will you?" He turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. And I sat there, tears streaming down my face, finally facing the cruel truth. I had spent my whole life for family, but in my old age, I had become nothing more than an outcast in my own home. One morning, I woke early and quietly packed a small suitcase, just a few sets of clothes, my old shawl. Sunlight streamed in through the curtains, catching the floating dust. I stood at the door, gazing around my house one last time. Memories filled every corner. Sarah's laughter as a child, the smell of apple pie during the holidays, the patter of my grandchildren's feet across the floor. Now all of it just echoes. I did not sell the house. I did not sign any paper. I simply left it locked behind me. In my bag, I carried the will I had carefully revised. My savings and property would go directly to the grandchildren, bypassing anyone else. I knew I could not stop every betrayal, but at least I could guard their future. Dragging the suitcase along the cobbled street, the wind stung my face cold, but bracing. I didn't know exactly where I was headed, only that I had to leave in order to breathe again, to find some small scrap of peace, even if it meant being alone. That afternoon, as I sat waiting at the train station, Sarah appeared. She rushed in, out of breath, her eyes swollen and red, clutching at her coat. "Mom, you're really leaving?" she asked, her voice breaking. I looked at her, The little girl I had loved with everything I had, now a woman scarred and fragile. I managed a faint smile and placed my wrinkled hand over hers. "I'm not leaving forever. I just need time away, so that you can see what truly matters." Sarah burst into tears, throwing her arms around me. Between sobs, she choked out, "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was so afraid. But I don't want to lose you." Hot tears blurred my vision. I didn't answer. I simply stroked her hair, like I had when she was small. Pain still throbbed deep inside me, but for the first time in months, a fragile spark of hope flickered. Maybe the bond between us wasn't completely broken. The train whistle blew. I let go of her, stepped onto the carriage. The door shut, the glass pane separating us. Sarah pressed her palm against the window, tears streaming. I pressed my hand against the same spot, smiling through my own tears. The train lurched forward. Her figure shrank, but her eyes, those desperate, sorrowful eyes, burned into my heart. I didn't know if we could ever fully find our way back. But I knew, at least tonight, Sarah had cried for fear of losing me, not just her husband. And that, however fragile, was a beginning. 3 months later, I was living in a small rented room on the outskirts of town, near the river. Life was simple, mornings spent watering potted plants, afternoons walking along the bank, evenings reading from old books. It was quiet, but at least it was mine. At least I was free. One cold winter evening, as I folded my shawl, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there stood Sarah. She was thinner than before, her face pale, but her eyes no longer held that hollow fear. This time, there was something else in them resolve. "Mom," her voice trembled, but it was firm. "I filed for divorce. I can't live in the shadows anymore. I want my children to grow up with the truth, not inside lies." I froze, unable to breathe for a moment. For months, I had feared she would remain chained forever. And now here she was, standing before me, fragile but determined like a child who had finally learned to walk on her own legs. I pulled her into my arms. Tears burned my cheeks as hers soaked into my shoulder, but this time her sobs weren't just of fear, they were of release. Outside, the winter wind howled against the walls, but in that small rented room, warmth bloomed again. Perhaps our family would never be whole again. Too much had been lost, too much had been broken. But at least the thread between mother and daughter had been found once more, faint but shining among the ashes. And for me, that was enough to keep walking forward. That night, after Sarah left, I sat by the window, listening to the wind rattling the shutters. But inside me, for the first time in years, there was no storm, only a fragile calm. I knew our family would never return to what it once was. Some wounds leave scars that never fade, but scars are proof that healing has begun. Sarah had finally broken free from the shadows. She had chosen truth over fear. And though the road ahead would be harsh, at least she would walk it with her children, not with chains. As for me, I had spent my whole life sacrificing, giving, hoping. I had thought that in my old age I would be surrounded by love and warmth. Instead, I was forced to face betrayal, loneliness, and loss. But now, holding my daughter again in my arms, I realized not everything had been taken from me. The bond between us, though battered, though bloodied, was still alive. I whispered into the night, as if to promise myself, maybe we can't rebuild everything, but we can begin again, not with illusions, not with silence, but with truth. Outside, the winter sky began to break. A faint streak of dawn stretched across the horizon, pale but insistent, and I knew as long as there was even the smallest light, there was still a way forward.